You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. The idea of giving military bonuses dates back to 1776, serving as a way to balance out what soldiers could have earned had they not joined the armed forces. This concept was inspired by English laws from the late 16th century, which aimed to provide care for disabled veterans and additional rewards for active service members. By August 1776, the U.S. Congress had adopted its first law to support disabled veterans, with lifelong half pay. However, it was only after significant issues, like mass desertions at Valley Forge, that threatened the survival of the Continental Army, prompting George Washington to push for expanded benefits similar to those offered by the British. By 1781, with the Continental Army mostly disbanded, veterans in Pennsylvania demanded back pay by marching on Philadelphia, leading Congress to flee the city. Despite initially slow to respond, Congress gradually introduced more comprehensive legislation for pensions and bonuses from 1788 onward, even extending these benefits to widows by 1836. Prior to World War I, military bonuses included both land and money, with the amount varying by rank. For example, a Continental Army private received 100 acres and $80 at war's end, while a major general got 1,100 acres. The policy of land grants was revisited in 1855, expanding eligibility and sparking political debates, especially in Tennessee, where a significant portion of land was awarded to veterans. By 1860, the program was abandoned in favor of a cash-only system due to a shortage of available land. Notably, veterans of the Spanish-American War did not receive a bonus, leading to political controversy after World War I, when they were initially given only a $60 bonus. The American Legion played a crucial role in advocating for additional compensation, though they faced criticism for their stance during the Great Depression. President Calvin Coolidge famously vetoed a bonus bill in 1924, arguing that patriotism bought and paid for is not patriotism. Nonetheless, Congress overruled his veto, passing the World War Adjusted Compensation Act, which provided World War I veterans with a compensation based on their service days, albeit deducting the initial $60 given upon discharge. In total, 3,662,374 adjusted service certificates were issued, valuing at $3.64 billion, equivalent to around $65 billion today. A trust was established to fund these certificates by 1945, with veterans allowed to take out loans against them, a provision that became particularly important during the Great Depression. The push for early redemption of these certificates was part of a broader context of social movements, including various marches on Washington, D.C. by the unemployed, such as Coxey's Army in 1894, and a significant demonstration by 25,000 Pennsylvanians in 1932, setting a precedent for future activism. Many of the veterans who made up the Bonus Army, also known as the Bonus Expeditionary Force or Bonus Expeditionary Force, set up camp in an area known as a Hooverville, located on the Anacostia Flats, which is today part of Anacostia Park. This spot was chosen despite being a bit swampy and muddy and quite a distance from Washington's Federal Center. Some veterans preferred to stay closer to the action, choosing partially demolished buildings on Pennsylvania Avenue near 3rd Street Southwest for their makeshift homes. Even though camping out at the Anacostia Flats technically broke federal law, an understanding was reached through the help of Major General Ulysses S. Grant III, Director of Public Buildings and Public Parks in the Capitol, and a friend of Pelham D. Glassford, the Superintendent of the D.C. Police. Grant III agreed not to object to the veterans staying there off the record. The camp, known as Camp Marks in honor of Police Captain S.J. Marks, who was sympathetic to their cause, was situated on the historically African-American side of Anacostia. It was not just makeshift shelters. The residents turned the camp into a tightly knit community, complete with laid-out streets, sanitation facilities, security overseen by an internal police force, and daily parades. Essentials like a religious tent and a Salvation Army lending library, which also served as a makeshift post office, became community hubs. Living in Camp Marks required veterans to register and show proof of their honorable discharge, or present a bonus certificate to get a membership card. Superintendent Glassford supported the camp by helping to secure food and supplies. On the legislative front, an important moment came on June 15, 1932, when the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Wright-Patman bonus bill with a 211 to 176 vote, a bill that aimed to expedite the payment of bonuses to World War I veterans. Following this, over 6,000 veterans gathered at the U.S. Capitol on June 17, hoping for a favorable outcome as the Senate voted. However, the bill was defeated decisively, with a vote count of 62 to 18 against it. On July 28, prodded by President Herbert Hoover, the leaders of Washington, D.C. told Pelham D. Glassford to clear out the buildings of protesters, shifting from Glassford's original advice to let the protesters disperse gradually. During the chaos that followed, an officer named George Chennault fired his gun at the protesters, resulting in the deaths of William Hushka and Erik Carlson. William Hushka, born in 1895 and originally from Lithuania, made his way to the United States and eventually sold his butcher shop to serve in the U.S. Army during World War I in 1917. After his military service, he settled in Chicago. A week after his death, he was laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. Erik Carlson was another valorous individual, a World War I trench warfare veteran from Oakland, California. Like Hushka, Carlson's final resting place is Arlington National Cemetery. In an earlier disturbance, local officials turned to the White House for help, leading President Hoover to request assistance from the Secretary of War, Patrick J. Hurley. Hurley then ordered General Douglas MacArthur to take action. By late afternoon, troops, including cavalry and infantry supported by tanks and machine guns, had forced the protesters, known as bonusers, for seeking their promised bonuses, to leave Washington. An intelligence report from the Army revealed that the Bonus Expeditionary Force, also known as BEF, had plans to take over the capital for good and initiate fighting, which would then signal communist uprisings in all the major cities. This report, written by Conrad H. Lanza in July 1932 from upstate New York, even suggested that some of the Marine Corps in Washington might join the revolutionaries. However, Marine units located just 8 blocks from the capital weren't called in. Interestingly, this report wasn't made public until 1991. Then in September 1932, the Department of Justice shared findings on the Bonus Army, highlighting early communist attempts to get involved. From the beginning in May 1932, communists worked to stir the pot within the movement, with the Daily Worker newspaper, a known communist outlet in the U.S., encouraging worker veteran delegations to head to Washington by June 8. President Hoover, reflecting on the events in 1932, acknowledged that while most of the Bonus Army members were peaceful, a small portion linked to communists and career criminals stirred most of the trouble. He emphasized in his 1952 memoir that the presence of at least 900 ex-convicts and communists among the Bonus Army shouldn't tarnish the reputation of the thousands who protested respectfully and lawfully. He praised the majority for their efforts to maintain order and peace. Benjamin Gitlow, a member of the Communist Party USA, noted in his 1948 memoir, The Whole of Their Lives, that communists did indeed join the Bonus Army during their march. Their aim was to enlist people to the communist cause as they moved across the country. However, a 2009 Encyclopedia Britannica blog post pointed out that the Bonus Army largely rejected the communist elements among them. Led by John T. Pace from Michigan, the communists found little support within the group. The veterans made it a point to kick out openly communist members, destroy their literature, and even adopted a motto directed at the communists: eyes front, not left. This showed a clear stance against the communist movement attempting to infiltrate their ranks. At 1:40 in the afternoon, General Douglas MacArthur gave General Perry L. Miles an urgent order to gather troops right away at the Ellipse, just south of the White House. Within 60 minutes, the 3rd Cavalry, led by then Major George S. Patton, made their way across the Memorial Bridge. The 12th Infantry joined them about an hour later, coming in by steamer. By 4 o'clock, Miles reported to MacArthur that the forces were in position and ready. MacArthur, now in service uniform like Eisenhower, relayed President Hoover's instructions for him to be close to the action, ready to give orders as needed and to accept responsibility for any backlash. Then, at 4:45 p.m., under MacArthur's command, the 12th Infantry and the 3rd Cavalry, supported by 5 light tanks steered by Patton, took their positions on Pennsylvania Avenue. This happened as thousands of people were leaving their workplaces, and they lined the street to see what was happening. The bonus marchers, thinking this military display was in their honor, started cheering. However, the mood changed drastically when Patton commanded the cavalry to charge at them, leading to cries of "Shame! Shame!" from the onlookers. The situation escalated as the infantry, armed with bayonets and tear gas, moved into the camps to drive out the veterans and their families. The veterans retreated across the Anacostia River to their main campsite. Despite President Hoover's order to stop the attack, MacArthur decided to continue, justifying his decision by falsely claiming the veterans were trying to overthrow the government. The confrontation resulted in 55 veterans getting injured and 135 arrested. Tragically, one veteran's wife miscarried, and a 12-week-old baby, Bernard Meyer, died after being exposed to tear gas. An investigation later concluded the baby died from enteritis, although the hospital admitted the tear gas exposure certainly didn't help the situation. During these events, Major Dwight D. Eisenhower, who would later become the 34th president, served as one of MacArthur's junior aides. He was against the idea of the Army's top officer leading an assault on American war veterans and advised MacArthur not to get involved, saying, "I told that dumb son of a bitch not to go down there. I told him it was no place for the chief of staff." Despite his objections, Eisenhower ended up supporting MacArthur's actions in the official Army report. Later in the evening, despite President Hoover's direct orders not to attack the encampment across the Anacostia Bridge, MacArthur went ahead with the operation around 9 p.m. MacArthur's assistant chief of staff claimed MacArthur defied Hoover's orders, but others, including Eisenhower, denied receiving such directives, blaming the communication breakdown on a refusal to relay the president's orders, though it's not clear why. Eventually, the shelters at the Anacostia camp were set on fire, with responsibility for the act remaining uncertain. Joe Angelo, a war hero known for saving Patton's life during the Meuse-Argonne offensive on September 26, 1918, tried to persuade Patton the day after the battle. Despite Angelo's act of bravery, Patton, embodying the government's stance, was indifferent and turned him away. This moment perfectly captures the essence of the Bonus Army conflict, Angelo as the disillusioned faithful soldier, and Patton as the detached government figure. The Bonus Army episode did not harm the military careers of those involved, but it was a political nightmare for President Hoover, playing a significant part in his defeat to Franklin D. Roosevelt in the election of 1932. Police Superintendent Glassford, who believed the police force was capable of managing the situation, was left dissatisfied with the decision to bring in the Army, which led to his resignation from his position. In March 1933, coinciding with Roosevelt's inauguration, MGM released Gabriel Over the White House. Funded by William Randolph Hearst's Cosmopolitan Pictures, the film featured a fictional President Hammond, who, unlike Hoover, chose not to deploy the military against a march of the unemployed. Instead, he forms an army of construction for public work projects. Eleanor Roosevelt praised the film for its depiction of veterans, viewing it as an improvement over Hoover's approach. During his 1932 presidential campaign, Roosevelt did not support the veterans' demands for bonus payments. However, when another march was organized in 1933, Roosevelt's administration engaged with the veterans more sympathetically than Hoover had. The Roosevelt administration provided accommodation, food, and entertainment for the veterans in a special camp in Fort Hunt, Virginia, and Eleanor Roosevelt made a personal visit to connect with and listen to the veterans. This gesture was warmly received, contrasting sharply with Hoover's more militaristic approach. On May 11, 1933, Roosevelt allowed 25,000 veterans to join the Civilian Conservation Corps, even waiving the usual age and marital status requirements. In 1936, Congress, with a Democratic majority, passed the Adjusted Compensation Payment Act, mandating the immediate payout of World War I bonuses, a decision solidified even after Roosevelt vetoed the act. The overwhelming support in Congress, with a House vote of 324 to 61 and a Senate vote of 76 to 19, ensured the veterans received their dues. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.